Hey folks, it's Patriot Nurse. Why do people not want families, children, and babies in this day and age? Well, the answer might shock you. We're going to discover today there's some scary and somewhat illuminating reasons why this is so. Let's get started. So friends, the job report has come out recently, in July that is, of 2024. And the numbers that really bear out this report are part of the reasons why I think we're going to find that people are not interested in settling down and having families anymore. First things first, men have to feel like they can take on the responsibility of wife and children. Yes, I said men, because ultimately men are the drivers of the family. They are the base level organizer for any community, any foundational creation of a state or a government. It starts with the family, and the man is the head of the family. In order for men to feel like they can reasonably take on that responsibility, they have to feel confident in providing for that family. And the jobs report coming out really tells the tale of how bad it is right now for the native-born American. Over the past quarter, the majority of the growth in jobs has not been in the private sector. It has not been in full-time work. It's been approximately one-third government growth. And the majority of the other jobs that have been added have effectively been gig economy work, meaning no benefits, no health insurance, nothing that essentially would provide the securities that the past two generations have expected as normative for starting a family and some type of central bedrock reassurance financially for being able to grow a family with. Also, when you consider that almost 1 million jobs were lost by native-born Americans and over 1 million and some, I would say it was 1.5 million jobs were added primarily in the foreign-born workers department. There is a real consequence to immigration, and especially unchecked, unfettered, open borders, illegal immigration, and that is that people are not able to pay their bills at home. And one thing that I found particularly startling was I was watching, it was actually CBN News, where they were doing an interview of what I would consider probably a well-meaning but quite deluded woman who was leading prayer efforts at the border. And as part of the prayer efforts at the border, they were going down there and praying for people who were coming into this country illegally just so they could bless them. And they were using and contorting, and I see this quite a bit in the Bible-believing communities, they were contorting a passage in Scripture which talks about do not oppress the sojourner, do not oppress. The Hebrew word is ger, which has many different connotations. An illegal immigrant is not one of them. Do not oppress the sojourner, the alien, or the foreigner among you. But what these people fail to understand is that when they're prioritizing the needs of the illegal, the needs of the foreign-born above the needs of their neighbor, then they're transgressing the higher law, which is to love your neighbor as yourself. You can't love your neighbor as yourself when you're fomenting the destruction of his livelihood. And this is the net result of bringing in millions of illegal immigrants. They create, by their very presence, downward pressure on the wages in the labor market. So when you have, in the United States now, people who do not wish to form families, do not wish to get married, do not wish to settle down, you can't really blame people because their ability to feed themselves is being sacrificed by the net importation of illegals who don't belong here. And unfortunately, the Bible-believing communities are complicit in fomenting this nonsense that not oppressing the sojourner, the ger, the foreigner, is somehow equivocated to supporting the social network for illegal immigrants to the detriment of the native-born American's ability to feed himself and to feed his family. So another perspective is the toxic inflow of feminism and I would say new wave feminism that's come down the pike. Not feminism that says that a woman is of equal value and inherent worth as a man, but feminism that seeks to equate a woman's role with a man's role. This is not a way to have a functioning family. You can't have two people who are fundamentally created differently, and there's the rub, the verb created. You can't have people who are created fundamentally differently try and do the same roles together with any type of order and semblance of peace in a house. You don't have peace in the home. You don't have shalom in the home, shalom bayis. You don't have it. And so if you've got two people competing against each other all the time, like what modern feminism tells us to do, then you're not going to have any type of environment that really sets people up for success. A woman has to be able to feel confident in her ability to run and manage a home and to feel secure in her femininity. And the only way that that happens is if she has a protector in the masculine. And our culture has demonized the masculine and called it toxic. Now, obviously, masculinity is not a brutish force that demands to suppress the female, but the long and short of it is that we have a competition now between the sexes instead of a cooperation. And when you don't have cooperation, you can't have peace, and you certainly can't build a family with children. This is one of the reasons why people aren't having babies. More than just the economic implication, the social implications of the destruction of the value of the woman, the value of the feminine, and the separate duty of the masculine. Duty, yes, I said the D word, duty of the masculine to protect and to provide and to pray for his family. When you don't have the three P's, protection, provision, and prayer, you don't have solid foundation for being able to build a home. And so that's one of the reasons why people aren't having babies. Another key point as to why people are not having children is the adulteration of food supply and the infertility rates. Now, this is really fascinating because I teach this actually in my classes, and the third day of the courses that I teach, the nutrition portion of Nutrition, Herbs, Old School Disease, we talk about the nutritional impacts on the fertility impacts of these cumulative choices made ultimately in the grocery store first and then at home in the kitchen. When you add, for instance, in your diet, trans fatty foods, that anything that you see with the word partially hydrogenated in it, anytime that you add this into the diet, it has been proven over and over and over again to have serious, catastrophic, and drastic impacts, not only on men's reproductive health, but also women's health. And in particular, when you're talking about the adulteration of the food supply and these toxic substances that are making their way into the foods that we eat, by the time that people get around to having children, by the time they've gotten around to saving up enough and being able to be financially sound enough, their bodies have withstood decades in some cases of this onslaught of the adulteration of this food supply, leading to infertility and problems conceiving. So it's little wonder that people are having problems nowadays when they're putting garbage in, and oftentimes not with their own consciousness in doing so, but consuming what is available to them because they're sitting there working their butts off trying to hustle and trying to save something, trying to make it, when you consider that the cost of living has gone up. So infertility and not having children is an unfortunate side effect of really burning ourselves out and burning the candle at both ends, eating toxic food just to get us to the next meal so we can stave off God knows what for the day coming. Another reason that people are not having children is the cost of everything is going up. We've already talked about the impacts of bringing in so many millions of people here, the downward pressure on the labor market. The cost of living going up is another consequence of this. And especially when you consider going into the election, the impact that millions of illegals coming in here has. It is more than just in the labor market. There is a finite amount of housing that is available. And in order for it to be constructed and created, it takes time, it takes energy, it takes resources. And unfortunately, it's done in kind of a shoddy workmanship is good enough, acceptable type of way. So the end result of all this is that housing is the least affordable now that it has been in decades. In many cases, people are so burdened by the cost of putting a roof over their heads that it takes home more than 50% of their paycheck. When you consider now that, again, the cost of living has gone up so much, with inflation, it's more than just housing is not available, right? It's more than just there are so many people coming in here illegally fighting for the same amount of houses that rent is being driven up. Our dollar is being debased. So when people look at our vanishing fertility rates in the United States, it would be tempting to say that it's purely just people who are being selfish and it's purely women who just don't want the traditional ways, but that's not necessarily true. When you look fundamentally at the issues that are at stake here, the dollar's value sliding into oblivion has a huge impact on just what that dollar buys. It also makes sense as to why, for instance, when you look in the good old days of the 50s and 60s, that you had the ability of families to survive on one income. Now, houses, of course, were smaller. Usually one car was the standard with a family, not two. But you could successfully raise, with a financial responsibility that was not unreasonably burdensome, you could raise a family, the nuclear family, on one income. It is so difficult to do that nowadays. And effectively, to do that would consign many people into poverty. And it's little wonder why people don't feel like doing that when they effectively have nothing to show for their paycheck at the end of the day. More than just the cost of housing, their dollar through the excessive printing and the money shenanigans run by the Federal Reserve. This is another reason why people don't want to have children. Now, the thing is, there is a faith aspect of this. And I think part of our ability to bring these values to the next generation. Oof, sorry, I had to take a break there. It was hot. I had to readjust here. Part of our ability to bring these values to the next generation depends on our resiliency as human beings. And certainly as women, we make a lot of the decisions in the household about money. And we have the ability also to build up our own homes and to do so with positivity and with words, but also with being disciplined ourselves. And as I've been looking at the job data and just looking at how abysmal the economy is in the United States, I'm looking inward as well and seeing what can I do in my own home to bless my home? What can I do as far as being a good steward of our resources? Some people might call this being frugal or being thrifty, but how can I ensure that I'm spending the family's resources wisely? How can I ensure that I'm creating a space of peace and joy in the house? And a lot of this is having hard conversations with yourself. Sometimes it's in the morning, like getting up early, arising early in the morning and just reflecting on what it is that I can do better for the day and asking God to give me grace and help me to be the person that I need to be in order to flow, to be that vessel to flow that love and that grace to my family. But in today's day and age, I think we really are going to be challenged asymmetrically in ways that previous generations never could have anticipated. There are so many onslaughts against the family right now, but I see a glimmer of hope on the horizon. And that is that whenever you come to these points of trial and of testing, where it seems like throughout the pendulum swing of history that the trend is swinging away from the family and it's swinging really towards absolute social breakdown and chaos, that it's that remnant that pull on that faith that they have, the good report that they had received, to pull on that faith and to pull themselves up, and not in their own strength, but in the confidence that's in God. Because we know that we in ourselves are not going to have that 100% availability to show up every day and get it done perfectly, but we know that His grace is sufficient, and we know that we can depend upon Him. And so I think in the future that we are going to be facing a lot of trial in the United States. We're going to see poverty become the norm. What previously would have been considered middle class now is lower income, and what previously was high and high in middle to upper income is now just making it. I think that's going to cause us to draw upon our resources and to remember what was instilled in us early on, the ancient path. And I do see that there is going to be a bifurcation and two parallel cultures arising. And one is destruction, and we saw this all last month with Self-Righteous Pride Month, which is so aptly named because pride was one of the earliest sins with the most catastrophic results. When we see that one side wants to celebrate everything that destroys the family and destroys nations and destroys cultures and civilizations, we see that half of the nation wants to support that, and to their own destruction, they will embrace it. And then we see the other part of the nation that even if they don't have all of the words to articulate exactly why such a thing is evil and why things are so grotesque and disgusting, they do know in their own heart that some things are good and beautiful, and they're choosing to dwell on whatever is good and pure and holy and honorable. And so I see that split is going to be what defines us, not only in this election season that's coming up, but also what's going to chart our path forward. I do not see that the United States is going to be a cohesive nation much longer. And in fact, the founders didn't. When you look early on, even before the Declaration of Independence, several of the dissenting voices recognized that the United States, being comprised of various different people groups who derive their income from various different sources, ultimately were going to have various different value systems. And that value system ultimately was going to be checked and was going to be decided through adversity. And now we're in a different type of adversity. We have faced the test of prosperity, which unfortunately we have failed, as many people do fail throughout the span of history. Prosperity brings laziness, and laziness breeds dependence, and dependence breeds slavery. So that's where we're at right now. The question is, what are we going to do, and which parts of the country and which enclaves of people are going to embrace the ancient path? That is the only way forward. That's the only way forward. I think that families have any type of semblance of a hope for a restoration of a bright future. I hope the video was helpful for you all today. If you did enjoy the video, I hope you'll subscribe to me here on YouTube, Patriot Nurse. If you want to be ready for times ahead, let me encourage you to follow what we talk about on this channel. Be prepared in the beans, bullets, and band-aids. The beans, of course, food preparation and having the ability to feed your family, whether it's storing up food or having propagation methods, planting a garden, or having a few extra crops on the rail of your patio. You can do this step by step. Also, the bullets portion, being able to defend yourself, and the band-aids. That's where I come in. On the Patriot Nurse channel here, I have over a decade worth of back catalog of videos for you to watch on how to be prepared. I also teach courses online and in person. The online courses, I got two options for you, the 4 and 7 hour course. The 4-hour course is a great way for you to dip your toe in, because worst case scenario, if push comes to shove and things start to get rough, you're always going to have to be able to take care of your family's medical needs. Hopefully it'll save you some money, and worst case scenario, it could save a life. So the 4 and 7 hour courses are there for you to choose from. I've got more information at the website, thepatriotnurse.com. Friends, we need to be pushing forward and plodding forward on the ancient path, knowing with surety that the time-tested lessons that have been instilled in us from a young age, these are the values that ultimately endure, and these are what keep families whole and together. Hope the video was helpful for y'all. Have a blessed week. For now, it's Patriot Nurse signing off. I'll see y'all later. Bye.